Did you have an issue with the two colours?
Well, funny you should actually mention.
Damn it!
So I'm just going to delve into my journey about how I found Peter. It all started with a parasite. I didn't want to leave the house at points. I did a 100-hour fast, and I really, really love eating. Realising the root cause was in the mind, and the parasite taught me that. I'm not saying go out and get yourself a parasite. Of course, the build-up of a few things led to my gut problems. Lockdown. I love people. Not having that really blocked me up. Obviously, there's the father never accepting me, and I can't get through to him. I still necessarily can't really. Previously, I was wishing I didn't have gut problems, hoping they'd go away, whereas Peter's words meant I didn't need to do that. I became accepting of it and began to love myself again, and this was the beginning of my journey to freedom. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Bertie. I just want to acknowledge Bertie for him to stand here and be the host and equally allow us all in to something that is very human, right? How important is, it may seem like so mundane, but just a bowel movement, I mean, in Ayurveda, we it's part of my studies, which is the healing arm of yoga. We recognize that we talk about stools all the time. We say the morning stool is like the morning newspaper. It kind of tells you what's going on with your body, right? And so for me, it's a very comfortable conversation, and yet even that becomes taboo. And so I just want to thank you for kicking this off. There's a lot of emotion there, I know, and especially with your dad. So. What's your dad's name?
James.
James. So there's a human being walking around the planet called James, and James has his view of everything like we all do, and Bertie's part of that tapestry of how James sees the world. And my assertion is, whether James likes it or not, he loves this human being. He may not display it in a way that seems like love. It wouldn't be like the hallmark presentation of love. It might, have looked like belittling him or thinking he wasn't good enough or whatever, or maybe even the occasional slap on the bottom. But he nonetheless, because he's human and this is his son, it's an extension of his lineage and his DNA, he has no choice but to love this human being. What would be in the way of that is James's view of himself and how things should be. But what it's revealing for Bertie is the idea that he's not maybe lovable as he is. And so that's his relationship with himself, ironically. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Once you look at it in terms of the two different people and the two different viewpoints, it kind of all makes sense, because he's got this very narrow mind of how he wants to be and how he wants his life to be, and that's, or how he wants me to be or whatever, and that's just down here, and I've got this my mind's what about here? But,
okay, but now, because this is beautiful, right? So we've got to listen to words. So he just declared James. Anyone here apart from the family know James? Okay, great. So a couple of you. So for the 50 plus others of us, we don't know James, and he just said what? He's got a narrow mind. See, we listen, and especially as kids are very impressionable. We listen as though what our parents, our care providers are saying is gospel. But I never listen like that. I know that everything that anyone is saying fundamentally is usually a crock of shit. And I still love them. Right? He's just telling him, so now James, who I've never met, poor James, he's not in the room, and he's already been declared to this 50 plus people that he's got this narrow mind. It's oh, James is an arsehole. I've never met him. Right? So James walks in here he's going to wow, that's such a cold group. Nobody thought this was all about being limitless. Wow, it's James. Right? What a dick. Right? So now you start to realize that your words are invariably so disparaging because it supports your narrative. So really, who has the narrow mind?
This guy.
So, damn it.
I'll get away with that one.
So James, if we look at James and I feel into the energy of who he might be, what do you think James, as your dad, feels without even knowing that you think he's got a narrow mind? What must that be like for James?
I'm not sure he realizes most of the time.
Maybe he doesn't, but it's irrelevant because this is your life and this is your view and James is part of it.
So
what was the quote you started with from Wayne Dyer?
If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
If you change the way you look at...
James. Kind of rhymes.
Yeah, then James will change.
That's nice. Yeah.
So you're under the impression that you need James. I really want you to get this and apply your own James. You can write it down, whoever it's a person or a circumstance. He's under the impression right now, this is a guy full of love, right? Clearly, which you all are, by the way. You've just got varying degrees of like blockage to that. And he's under the impression, his brain is trying to convince him that he needs James to be different in order for him to be okay. Can you see that? Is it true that James needs to be different for you to be fully self-expressed?
No.
But it occurs that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like in order to make the relationship work and make things flow, I have to not be myself, and then I'm restricted.
Yeah, so this is powerful. So you're under the impression that when in the presence of James that you have to behave differently. Give us an example of what that looks like.
I can't get through to him because we don't relate on the same levels.
Yeah.
We have topics that we can talk about which include cricket, and that's probably like where we finish.
Okay.
And I'm trying to like get through to him and have conversations that I like to have.
Yeah.
He's not interested in those conversations, so I have to, I can't say much because usually I'm relatively expressive.
Okay, so if we just listen to language, right? I have to, and I can't say much. Right? Evidence seems to be the contrary. He's saying a lot, right? I can't say much. There's nothing wrong with his voice box, right? He's taking hot air and he's making sound, and as far as I know, most of you are comprehending it, right? So you see, we say things that become the constraint. So you can start to see that if we have a view of an external circumstance, and particularly a person that for us is in somehow a perceived threat, then the system's shut down, even his gut. Right? Like this is how profound and how powerful your mind is, that you're literally creating ongoingly your experience of life on every level. And so when he says, I have to, what's the feeling of have to? And no one in my mastermind can answer because we've covered this.
Do we open this to the floor? Or?
Yeah, sure. Like pressure, right? And again, so you listen, and this is an invitation for all of you here because I want you to support one another. So as you listen and you speak, I want you to hear when people say, I have to, I must, I need to, I should. These are all oppressive words that we use constantly. Oh, I should have done that. Right, so now you've got a judgment about your history, or I should be doing this, I should be eating better, I should be working out more. So now you're in a state of oppression, but yet with this sort of idealized view of how you should be behaving. But it's really a continuation of a care provider that often taught you the language of constraint. And so now we hear it here, like I can't speak up, can't say what he wants. It's not a truth, it's an occurring. It's how life, like in the presence of James, he feels like I can't. But there's no like anyone holding a gun against his head and say, well, you can't say too much. Like, you're limited to 500 words in front of James, right? Right? Yeah. And then the have to, like he feels he has to behave in a certain way. Everyone can relate to this, but it's a lie. There's no have to. So where the way that life occurs is that you think the constraint is over there with James, right? And you're starting to, obviously, by virtue of this conversation and what I asked you earlier, to see that, oh, hang on a minute, I changed the way I look at things, the things that I look at change. James may or may not update his program. My assertion is, based on 20 plus years of doing this, James will be a different human being in your presence when you're different.
Nice.
Now, I've got countless examples of like, there's someone in my mastermind group right now, and there's, out of interest, I think there's 5 or 6 people. Just show a hand. Who's in my mastermind currently? Holy shit balls. 2, 4, 6, 7. Wow, thank you. So we have a 6-month program going on where I'm sharing, like, both doing something like this live, but simultaneously helping everybody who's in the group understand what I'm doing. And this is building up to, help people really integrate these philosophies and this understanding into life, right? Whether someone's a coach or a practitioner, a parent, a leader, it doesn't really matter. So helping him to see, that by his shift, he can inspire the shift in someone else. And there's someone in the mastermind who, when I first spoke to her, I think it was about month 3, hadn't slept, and not like as a exaggeration, but wasn't sleeping, and hadn't been sleeping for, I don't know, years, a long time. Like, and the cascade of physiological issues you can imagine as somebody who's not sleeping is just, and one of her big concerns was a sibling who had a substance problem, and she felt, as the older sibling, it was incumbent upon her to always take care of her sibling, which was beautiful, but you can imagine how debilitating that is when somebody's doing whatever they're doing and that's their life. So anyway, what was so beautiful is that like I worked with her during the course of the mastermind, and then the month later, she just actually was literally glowing. Like even people who are in the group sent me like, wow, she looks so beautiful. I'm like, well, if you don't have sleep for a few years, you look pretty rough. So, the relative improvement was so stunning. And the reason I'm sharing this is she said, it's crazy. My brother's now calling me. And she was always the one checking, because if you think about the energy, like if I'm talking and I get up and I sort of progressively am moving this way, at some point, for Bert, he's a loving guy, but it could get a little bit, it's a little bit like, what's going on? It's a little weird. There's not much space.
10:29.
So for her, she recognized that by me actually allowing my brother to be who he is, doesn't mean that she doesn't care, but to give him space to have his own reality was actually the space that afforded him the ability to then miss her and reach out. So it was just so profound. Not only she was finding sleep because she'd stopped this insane idea that she would, had to take care of the whole world, which is exhausting. But then she realized, wow, actually by honoring someone's reality where they are, and I often use the term right now, but if you really get that, someone is where they are right now. And it introduces the opportunity to recognize this isn't like permanent. Right, that he right now has a drinking problem, and I don't know what a drinking problem means, right? Like it's a term. Like, is his drinking problem 6 bottles of beer a day, or is it 3 bottles of gin, or I don't know. So again, that was her perspective reinforcing stress, which he would feel. He would obviously loved his older sister and da da da. So you get the vibe, and you understand that her shift, letting go of the idea that was up to her, it was incumbent on her, she was responsible, gave him space to come forward. So likewise with Bertie, I had no idea that we were going to be talking about Bertie, but you can all relate to this, the fact that there's this human being called James who I assert loves this man. The way that love shows up, though, is not how he thinks it should or how he wants it. So now we start to see the narrow mind is actually over here, because he's saying his relationship to his dad, and my guess is energetically his dad feels inadequate and feels dismissed, probably feels disrespected, probably doesn't feel like anyone cares about him. And part of that energy is because his own child, and maybe children, Georgia's got a couple of tears in the eyes, are not accepting him for him. And James is doing the best he can do based on the conditioning that he has and however he was raised, right? Yeah. Like if I had a son and I found out he felt he couldn't speak in front of me, do you know how devastated I'd be?
That would be,
That's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've got a human being who's doing the best he can within his limits, but he's heartbroken. And I'm not saying he's the poster child for what it looks like to be a dad. But you're a new evolution. Everyone who has kids here, I'm sure there's quite a few people. Amazing. So I'll tell you right now, your kids are so much smarter than you. I hate to burst a bubble, but they're just so much smarter. Stop telling them how to live their life and start listening. You can, tell them to stay away from the stove and don't walk into the road. That's fine. But think about, like, who here has an iPhone 10? Does anyone know? Okay, well, get with the times. But the point is, each iteration of technology, we understand it's implied, it's implicit, that it's an evolved version of whatever we had previously. Apply the same thing to consciousness, right? So meaning, like, your children, in terms of the lineage of consciousness, are more evolved because they're coming out later. So as a parent, if you just get that, again, they need the software, but their operating system is far more advanced than yours. So sure, you can teach them how to play tennis or how to cook an egg or whatever it is, but it's just a different way of looking at life. So now James is an old version of the current consciousness. It's as redundant as me as looking at a Spectrum whatever, or whenever we had dial-up and go, oh, that's so narrow-minded. So well, that's where it was at the time, right?
Yeah.
See, now look at this floor, and what color do you think this floor is?
Oh, I want to go with like a royal beige.
It's pretty fancy. So we're in England, it's right, it's not just beige. And then what color would you say that is? Peasant green.
A mold green.
Okay.
Moldy green.
Great. And now, until I pointed out the floor, Did you have an issue with the two colours?
Well, funny you should actually mention.
Damn it! Why did I have to pick the floor?
Anyway, I'm gonna retract that and be like, I'm just gonna say, no, I didn't notice.
No. We didn't rehearse this, I promise. Okay, so aside from the tenant improvements that you're considering, does it elicit an emotional response of anxiety or frustration?
I feel this is actually very interesting because I feel like it would have done before I
work. Okay,
before
great.
work.
Yeah.
That would have kind of like really wound me up. But now I kind of just, it is the way it is and it's got its own beauty. I think the floor is potentially not going to affect many people in the room.
I promise you, no one noticed it until I brought it up. But anyway, so you said it is the way it is, right? And it doesn't impact the way that you currently live your life. So say what I said to the best of your ability to repeat using the word floor.
The floor is what it is and it won't impact the way I live my life.
Okay, now replace floor with James.
James is the way he is and it won't impact the way I live my life.
Say it again, a little louder for the people in the back.
James is the way he is and it won't impact the way I live my life. Ah, thank you
Right.
very much. So genuinely, wow, that's, yeah,
So where was the problem?
powerful. That's it.
Yeah, but where did you think the problem was?
James.
Yeah. Who here, first of all, has got their own version of James? Great.